There is a moment in the wild that no training prepares you for, standing completely alone in the open, nothing between you and a 2,000-pound rage machine, knowing the only reason you stepped out of that vehicle was to save an animal that could just as easily kill you for it. That moment happened to Marcus, and what the lioness did when it was all overshadowed every belief he held about the wall between humans and the animal world. This is the story of Sombra, and the day the savannah proved that gratitude has no species. If you've never seen a wild lion do what Sombra does at the end of this story, watch this all the way through. Subscribe to Island History and hit that bell. We find the stories that stop you cold. Marcus had worked the reserves for 11 years. He had tracked leopards at midnight. He had held his breath 6 feet from a bull elephant in musk. He was not a man who frightened easily. But the morning the buffalo came, something in his gut turned to stone before his eyes even registered what was happening. He had spotted Sombra's tracks at first light, the wide, deep press of a mature lioness he had known for 4 years. She had survived a snare injury, raised 2 litters, and chased off 3 male lions from her territory alone. He knew those tracks the way a father knows a daughter's handwriting. What he had not expected was the Cape buffalo. It appeared at the edge of the dry riverbed like a moving storm front. 2,000 pounds. The kind of animal veterans call the most dangerous 4-legged creature on the continent, not because it is the largest, but because when it decides something must be destroyed, it commits with a patience that borders on the incomprehensible. This one had a reason. In the same scrub, behind a cluster of thornbush no taller than a man's chest, were 4 of Sombra's cubs, 3 months old, eyes still carrying that liquid innocence, not yet old enough to know the world was built to kill them. The ground moved before Marcus heard the sound. The buffalo was charging. He threw the truck door open. There was no protocol for this, no time, barely breath. But before his feet hit the dirt, the brush exploded. Sombra came out of nowhere and everywhere at once. 400 pounds of muscle and something that can only be called love collided with the buffalo's shoulder at full speed. She clawed at its face, raked its nose, twisted her body in ways that defied anatomy to stay in contact, not fighting to win, but buying seconds. Every second her cubs needed to disappear deeper into the brush. The buffalo was done being patient. It snapped its massive neck sideways and launched Sombra through the air. She hit the ground hard. The dust rose around her and she did not move. The buffalo turned, horns down, eyes locked on the fallen lioness. Marcus ran. He did not think about the mathematics of what he was doing. A human being, unarmed, sprinting toward a Cape buffalo committed to a killing blow. He grabbed a branch and hurled it at the animal's flank with everything he had. The buffalo stopped. It turned its massive head away from Sombra. Its dark, unblinking eyes found Marcus and locked on. Marcus stopped dead. The buffalo lowered its head. The muscles across its back bunched like cable under tension. He closed his eyes. He had made his calculation before he ever left the truck. If the cubs survived, if Sombra survived, then whatever happened to him in the next 3 seconds was worth it. What happened next came from above. Sombra launched herself onto the buffalo's back. Her jaws closed on its spine. Her forelegs wrapped around its neck. The buffalo bellowed and began to spin, to buck, to thrash with every ton of muscle it possessed. She held on. It twisted violently, dropped its head reverse direction. She held on. Because she was not merely a lioness in that moment. She was every mother who has ever stood between her children and the thing trying to take them, operating from a place deeper than muscle and bone, a place that does not recognize the concept of giving up. Eventually, the buffalo had nothing left. It shook Sombra loose one final time, turned, and retreated into the wide savannah until the dust swallowed it. If you are still watching, drop a comment with "She held on." Let's see who is truly following this story. Marcus dropped to his knees, lungs pulling at the air in ragged gulps. He looked up slowly, certain of what was coming next. Sombra was standing 15 feet away, watching him. He kept his head down, did not move, did not make a sound. He offered the only thing he had left, complete surrender. Sombra walked toward him, not fast, not with the low, coiled focus of a hunting animal. She walked the way she moved between her cubs, deliberate, certain, carrying a gravity that belonged to something very old. She stopped inches from his face. Marcus held his breath so completely that the silence between them became its own kind of sound. Sombra lowered her head and pressed her wet nose against his shoulder. That was all. A single, deliberate touch from a creature that could have ended him without effort. 400 pounds of apex predator reaching across every instinct she possessed to say something no human language has ever found the right word for. Marcus raised his trembling hand and laid his fingers gently against her mane. She leaned into it. He sat in the African dirt with his hand buried in the mane of a wild lioness, and the world went very quiet around both of them. A few minutes passed. Then Sombra turned toward the brush and let out a soft, low sound, not a roar, not a growl, something quieter, something meant only for the 4 small creatures still hiding in the thorn bush. They came out one by one, tumbling, clumsy, entirely unconscious of the catastrophe narrowly avoided on their behalf. They pressed against Sombra's legs and she dropped to the earth and pulled them in, licking their faces with a ferocity that looked almost frantic. The release of a fear so large that even now, with the danger gone, her body was still discharging it. Marcus watched and did not speak. The wild is not sentimental. It does not operate on mercy or justice. It is a system of staggering, indifferent complexity, eat and be eaten, survive and be survived. But somewhere inside that system, encoded in the body of a lioness who had just taken on 2,000 pounds of rage to keep 4 small lives intact, there is something that cannot be reduced to pure survival, something that recognizes the presence of an ally, something that responds to sacrifice with acknowledgement. Marcus called it the most honest thing he had ever witnessed. He drove back along the eastern track as the morning sun pushed the shadows west. Behind him, in the thorn bush by the dry riverbed, Sombra's cubs slept soundly in the African heat, entirely safe, entirely whole, entirely unaware that the world had almost taken everything from them. Some things the wild gives back. If Sombra's story moved you, if that moment where she pressed her nose against Marcus's shoulder gave you chills, hit that like button now. Subscribe to Island History for more stories that go beyond the footage and find the truth living inside the wild. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that courage and gratitude are not human inventions. We'll see you in the next one.